But if you want to make a change in your behavior and your subconscious thinking and your relationship to the emotions, you have to make sure that you are, in a way, separating yourself from an emotion you're just experiencing. Because then that leads us to be able to experience positive emotions, much more so than the negative ones.
Welcome to the Generation Youth Podcast. I'm your host, as always, James McLamb. I've had a unique opportunity this fall to be able to engage and meet a lot of exciting speakers in the youth field. And Kevin, my guest today, is how are you doing, Kevin?
I'm fantastic, James. How you doing?
I'm doing exceptionally well. And the algorithms have guided me to you on Instagram. They have said you need to meet this guy. And if we start looking at mutual friends, we can see why. That we have a lot of people in common that we know, and now we can connect and be together. And I'm really excited about this conversation today because the topic that you are working on, the topic that you land on quite a bit, is something that I've been pondering for my own children and how to help them, even as they grow into adulthood in their early 20s, how to help them make wise decisions and affect with their story. But before we go into that, our audience would love to learn about you from you because they get tired of me talking. They'd love to hear from you. So if you wouldn't mind, introduce yourself to the Generation Youth audience.
Sure thing. So, James, again, thank you so much for having me on. My name is Kevin Mecchella. I like to really throw people off by saying I'm a euphonium player. And that's like, what are you I'll get to that in a minute. But no, more seriously, I am a youth speaker and a behavioral coach for middle school and high school students. And what I do is I primarily work with high school students where I go into a school district and I either will do an assembly or a workshop. I also have some physical resources to help them along their journey of mental health and making good decisions and resilience and willpower and all these wonderful things that we want our students to accomplish and take on. And sometimes all three of these aspects of this program upgrade my decisions. And I've been doing this for quite some time. And this started actually way back when I started my career as a K through 12 music teacher. And I loved it. And I love working with kids, but I couldn't find home. I couldn't find a job that I could see myself in a long time. This was also 2008 or 2009, excuse me. So wonderful financial crisis. And I really couldn't find home. And I thought to myself, this might be an opportunity to actually go explore if I really want to become maybe a professional musician. Maybe I would go back to school, maybe to become like an audio engineer. Maybe I do want to, I don't know. I had so much questions and so much uncertainty in my life and so much stress and anxiety because society says you have your degree, you have your piece of paper. What are you doing? What's your next job? What are you taking interviews? And a lot of stress. And not having this professional success at that point was really serious to me because I defined myself and identified myself as so much so as somebody who has professional success, either as an educator or a musician. And I wasn't having that. And that disconnect caused a lot of stress and anxiety. These two emotions I did not handle well at all. So much alike many students today that do not handle negative emotions well at all. And sure enough, I made an incredible amount of poor decisions. That led me down a very dark journey of staying out all night, drinking, doing really dangerous and illegal things. And it resulted in me getting into a very serious car crash. At that point, thank God everybody was okay. I said to myself, something needs to change right now. And that process of accountability and being grateful for everybody being okay led me down a really interesting journey. And this is kind of like my Batman phase, if you will, and not so much as Batman, but as when Bruce Wayne, for you comic nerds out there, when Bruce Wayne went to study to become a ninja. He had no idea what he was going to do with that skill, but he needed to retool and skill and get these skills as the ninja, then, of course, to become Batman. Playing euphonium is not as cool as being a Batman, but it was my time kind of leaning into myself. And it ended this journey with me doing my master's work at the Royal Liège Conservatory in Belgium. So I lived in Europe, had an incredible time, a very difficult time, very amazing, very stressful, all these great, wonderful, contrasting things because I was so far outside my comfort zone. And I came back and my girlfriend at the time, did not even recognize who I was. I was the most absolutely upgraded version of myself.
How long were you there?
About a year.
Out
And
of here. Wow.
yeah, it was, I mean, I walked off of the plane. This was not a study abroad program. I got off the plane hoping some French guy would come pick me up. And French, Flemish, two parts of Belgium. And it was incredible. And I came back and I was able to be creative and meld all the things that meant so much to me and be able to work with teens again. So, what I do in these programs is I'm able to teach, I'm able to work with kids, I'm able to perform music because a lot of the decisions I made around my career is a basis for the conversations I speak to these kids about. And I'm able also to run my own business. I love entrepreneurship. I love running my own business, if you will. So, and that's where I am today. And that's what I do.
I love that. I love that you had to make that. While we were telling that story, I was thinking of some situations that I know of and how young people that are in those early 20s are struggling right now with decisions. And a lot of it has to do with the way they view themselves, the way that they are telling their own story. And that was one of the things that struck me about your approach dealing with decisions, and that you talk about that decisions come from your own story. Could you unpack what that means and how that's a big issue with youth today? Because it really resonated with me. And I'm sure if it's resonating with me, our audience as well is hearing it.
Yeah, sure. So the reason why it probably resonates with you is because we all know deep down the truth is that our decisions will reflect the quality of our life, from as small as what we have for breakfast to as large as, do I get in the car or not? Do I pick up the vape or not? Do I send that text or not? These are, every micro and macro decision in our life determines the quality of our life. Now, the problem with teens is that their prefrontal cortex is still developing,
Yeah.
and they are very impulsive, and they don't even know, first of all, who they are, let alone their story. One of the first questions I ask in these programs, I say, raise your hand if you ever heard this sentence: money doesn't grow on trees. And 90% of their hands go up, because half the time the story that they're being told is being fed to them by the people that are sometimes the closest, their brother, sister, grandma, grandpa, mom, dad. And that is already an understanding. Wow, a lot of our story, and when I say story, I really mean subconscious beliefs about who we are and what we're meant to do in our life, is not even our own. So the part of self-exploration and self-discovery is understanding the story, the subconscious beliefs that have been fed to you throughout your whole life, and then deciding whether or not that your vision and your mission in life will align with that story. Most of the time, it doesn't. So we have to
Mhm.
go on this journey of rewriting our story. And what I want to do with teens is get that process going as fast as possible, because at that point, they are, like I said, very impulsive due to their nature of just their development. And this is the time where they're most likely to make very poor and irreversible decisions sometimes. At the same time, they can make fantastic decisions. I've made some positive decisions in my high school career that have helped me throughout my musical career. I mean, an organization that I used to play with, a concert band and a wind ensemble, in 10th and 11th grade, they are my colleagues now. Like, that connection I made are professional colleagues that I work with today. It's so there is, like I said, a myriad of positive and negative decisions. But the way I do this with teens is I introduce something called the story cycle. And this is a really great visual and a diagram for students to look at and say, oh, okay, this makes sense. I'm going to remember that. And this is kind of a version you'll see in many, if you go follow other personal development people, but I've kind of simplified it a little bit. And it goes like this: the story that you tell yourself, or the subconscious beliefs, will dictate your actions. Your actions that you take will dictate the results, and the results you get will reinforce your story. So if a student says, I'm really bad at math, math sucks, I've never need to use the Pythagorean theorem, I'm more of a creative, blah, blah, math hates me and I hate math, well, then we know what their actions are going to be. They're not going to study. They're not going to go get extra help. They're not going to use ChatGPT the way it's intended to be used. They're not going to do all these things. And of course, their results will show. Their results will be poor test grades, poor quizzes, and they might even fail a course. That will say to them and reinforce that story. See, told you, I'm not good at math. I suck at math. This is terrible. And all they have to do to begin this process is add one word: yet.
Yet. Wow, that's
I'm not good
powerful.
at math yet, but I will be. I will work. I will study. I will sacrifice a bit. I will be consistent, and then all of a sudden, the actions and results change, and the story now changes. So Granted, there are other things like journaling and different things we talk about that are a little bit more in depth than just adding one word to rewrite that story, but it is an unpacking of subconscious beliefs.
All right, two things. First off, when you said money don't grow on trees, I started laughing inside. I grew up on a nursery, a tree farm, and my dad from very early on would say, "Oh, for most people, money don't grow on trees, but here, money does grow on trees." And so I can't look at trees or anything without seeing dollar signs. So that's a story that I guess it's a story of opportunity that I was fed very early on. But the biggest question I have is, how do we get them to add that word yet? Because I see a block. I see a big obstacle with most of them. My son, if he's listening, sorry I'm mentioning you. My son, who is in it, he has this cycle. He's had this cycle on several things, and adding that word "yet" is something that he seems incapable of doing in certain situations. It's like, that doesn't apply here. You don't understand really what's going on. You don't understand how I feel. You don't understand what's going. I'm like, and his older sister, who's incredibly, incredibly successful and just doing great things, it's like, we grew up in the same house and the same stuff. What is your problem? So why are you like this? And why can't you add this word "yet"? So how do we help them?
Great question. So let me ask you, first of all, how old is your son?
21.
Okay. So that is the that is the most interesting, amazing age, because he's just probably entering the real world, whether he's, finishing up college, going to college, not going to college, whatever it may be. He is entering this point where he's going to be working with and really associating with people that are, 30, 40, 50 years older than him. And that is a huge part of the growth process and that finishing stages of, as we talked about before, the prefrontal cortex, which fully forms around 26, 27. So what's interesting at this point, that conversation is probably going to change very soon in the next few years, because he's going to run into issues where it doesn't, what you said was interesting. Yeah, but those are the worst words in the world. Yeah, but it doesn't apply to me. Yeah, but it doesn't apply to me. Great. Now what? So what I'm doing right now is just pretending that I was in somebody's shoes, not yours, James, because your dad. Right now, 21-year-old still doesn't want to listen to dad. There's some things like, he's got a point, but whatever, he's still dad. He doesn't really, right? And that's part of the development as well. But I'm looking at it as somebody from a outside perspective, in school, say a counselor, social worker, psychologist, whatever it may be, because that, or a teacher for that matter, that he's really, has a connection with, that is the person that can get through. And a lot of it is the conversation and going deeper and deeper and deeper and not allowing the conversation to end, because again, that doesn't apply to me. Okay. And then if I was in that position of somebody who was an outside force, I would say, okay, now what? Now what? If it doesn't apply to you, how do we move past this? So you keep asking questions, and there's a fantastic book called The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay Stainer. I think that's the name. Fantastic book for anybody really. And it has very simple questions that really dig deep from a kind of a coach's side of the equation, not necessarily a psychologist or something like that. And little things like, asking, I think it was asking and 3 times in a row, and getting that layer deep. Okay. Now, so this is just a conversation. This is like tips and tricks to keep the conversation going. That's one way we enable them to rewrite their story. The second way is teaching them to discover the silent moments. And what I mean by the silent moments is the moments that they're feeling something, because a lot of it is so subconscious, they're not even sure of what they're saying to themselves. But why are they feeling anxious? Why are they stressed? Why do they feel sad? Why do they feel depressed in these moments? And when we are talking with them and saying, okay, we have to uncover the trigger moment of why we feel this way, because when you are triggered in a certain way to feel a certain way, you can backtrack that and say, okay, well, that kind of comes across because that person said this, and this is why I started going down this road of this train of thought. So it's really a twofold thing. Is it from a coach's perspective or an adult's perspective, keep that conversation going, right? Whether it's good questions or just literally not letting them just keep the conversation going, or teaching them to listen to their body and their physical space and say, okay, what am I feeling right now? Let's backtrack why I'm feeling this way, why I got triggered. And this is the train of, okay, oh, it's because I felt this way. but that's not true, right? So it's a twofold thing. And there's many other different ways to go about that, but that's some of the ways that when I really have that one-on-one time with students, that's kind of what I'll implement.
That's powerful to help them. And I love what you said. And there's a friend of mine, Bob Tiede, who we interviewed several years ago, and he's the question guy. He used to be one of the leadership of crew. And he says, the most powerful question you can ask anybody is just tell me more. It's not really a question. It's just tell me more. Tell me more. And Tom Ziegler, who's the son of the late Zig Ziglar, he would just say, why is that important to you? Why is that happening? He uses why as a phrase as he dives deeper and deeper on those things to help them try to uncover. And you're so right, Kevin, in saying that there's a hesitancy as parents, as teachers, as anyone working with you to want to go in and fix it and throw a solution when what you're saying to do is the right approach, and that is to help them come to the realization
It's the only
of
way.
where the situation is. Help them do this. And of course, that can become across as annoying when it's a parent sometimes comes to you and then that
Exactly.
third
Exactly.
access person. But you're so right in helping them understand this. And this cycle, whew, if they get in that,
And I'll follow
it
up
can
too with one of the
dangerous.
practices that I have them do or suggest them do is to actually journal, because this is now, in my program, I like to make sure that I am giving some type of tactical things that they go home and do tonight or tomorrow, whatever. So a lot of it is actually journaling, because if we're talking about rewriting our story, we have to actually pick up the pen and write a little bit. And I think
Right.
this is really good for some people. Personally, actually, I don't have a general practice of journaling because it just doesn't apply to me, but I will do it when I feel like I need to. I do other things for self discovery and self actualization, which is meditating and breathing and different things and just being one with my thoughts. Also, I'm at a different point in my life than a 17-year-old. I'm 37. So I've done a lot of that work. But journaling is huge because they're literally figuring out what's in their brain and just getting it out. Because a lot of it is just getting the weeds, pulling the weeds out to
Yeah.
figure out what is the deeper issue and why we feel the way we do.
And I think journaling helps eliminate the clutter that interferes their mind because
Mhm.
there's so much going on. And for those of you who are watching, you see I'm holding up a smartphone, and I think that contributes to cluttering themselves up so they can't figure out where they're at and what's going on. Technology, for all of its greatness, has really created a situation that, they're almost like it's a baseball game and they're at the bottom of the ninth inning and they are down and they don't know how they're going to win this game at all. And I mean, youth are only responding to the world that we gave them, and we didn't know how to live in this world ourselves. But we thrust it upon, as you pointed out, young people whose minds are still developing, and we expect them to survive. Ugh, that's a we don't give them the space and the time to figure it out.
The technology question is, when schools have a call with me before they bring me in, and they really are leaning down in that road, I'm going to be very honest with them. And I'll tell them it is a problem that I am not going to solve for you. Like, this is a way bigger issue than a 60-minute assembly or a workshop. This is a huge societal development problem. And we're just doing our best. We understand that the addiction to technology and specifically in is social media, I myself find myself using it more than I like. I mean, again,
Mhm.
thank gosh I'm aware of that and I'm at a different place in my life, but yes, it's a huge thing. Here's the good news is that every time I ask students what they feel their relationship to their phone and social media is, almost all of them say it's negative. So at
Yeah.
least they understand it. And I think that goes a lot to what we're trying to do and bring awareness to that. And then obviously put in things in place that'll help them create good habits, will help them, again, be aware of their triggers. Half the reason they might be doom scrolling is because of the way they felt prior. If you feel great, you want to be outside. You want to,
Yeah.
go do something physical. Like, it's a bigger conversation than a program that I can solve immediately.
So you're going to someone, maybe be coaching them or speaking to youth, and you're talking to them about their story cycle. What are they going to, do you get pushback? And if you do get pushback, how do you handle it? Saying, look, my decisions are just temporary. They really aren't going to impact me. I'm young. I should be able to live my life. I've heard this so many times for late high schoolers into college. Hey, I need to make my fun. These decisions aren't going to affect me long term. And I'm like, really? You just don't see. And how do we break through? and get them to, you just want to grab a hold of them and
Yeah,
shake
yeah,
them.
yeah.
Kids, come on. This is big deal. They don't seem to see that. How do we break through?
So there's a couple of tactical ways that I'll do it. Number one, I'll tell some stories, obviously some stories that I've encountered, and I try to make this as serious as possible because a lot of the weight of the story is not like, oh, I just got in a car accident, it was really bad, thank God everyone was okay, and move on. I mean, I go into every single detail. The car flipped. The car flipped over and I watched it in slow motion. And the reason I watched it in slow motion because my brain was pushing so many neurochemicals, I guess cortisol and adrenaline, trying to avoid this trauma that was about to happen for me to make a split second decision, but it was already like too late. And I watched this car flip in slow motion, just like a movie. And, I'll go even more into the details when I do this program. And that definitely helps. But again, they may be saying like, okay, well, you should have got more sleep because that was the whole issue. I fell asleep at the wheel, and well, it's your problem. I'm not going to do that. I mean, I would never drive incoherent or intoxicated or anything like that. That's your deal. And they may be thinking that, right? Oh, idiot, whatever. Same way I used to think when I was in high school. That's not me. So I reach some of them through a story. Sometimes what I like to do is I like to use Tim Urban's 90-year calendar. What a fantastic resource that is. And if you're unfamiliar with it, the 90-year calendar that Tim Urban did in his TED Talk is what he did was just put a single little box for every week of somebody's life as if they were to live to 90. So it was an average lifespan, maybe a little above average. But you looked at this piece of paper with all these little boxes, and there was two things that you said. Number one, there's not that many boxes. Okay. It's not a lot of time. That is kind of gives the surrealness of life itself. And at the same time, you realize, wow, like I've got so much time available to me. Like so it's this contradictory thing. But what you can do is you can say, listen, you've got this amount of time, and you kind of block it off like this little eighth or whatever, even less of this roadmap, of this visual. And this is the only time that you've got to invest in yourself. And I say that dramatically. Yes, we could always invest in ourselves moving on. But when you're in high school and in college, these are the 8+ years that everybody is here for you. They are here to help you develop and help you grow and help you learn and help you become the best upgraded version of yourself. So it's like, am I either going to waste this time and make irreversible decisions that will affect the whole rest of this? Or am I going to lean in? Am I going to really use this time to the best of my ability to become the best version of myself? So that's another very interesting resource that I use sometimes when it's appropriate. But, a lot of it is, again, the realization too, James, that here's the real thing. We're looking for 100%. That deep down, you and I both know we're not going to reach 100% of teens to say, oh, we've figured it out. Like we've got them. They're all set. They're going to make great decisions for the rest of life. We want that, but we know that's not the reality. So a lot of it is we do the best we can, and we try to lean into the students that are going to make the changes in their life, because that's their sheer reality. Here's the next part of this is that some of the students that will make a change in their life and look at things differently, that'll happen later on. I remember a speaker that came into my high school. I never thought about him for years and years until later down the road. Something popped in my mind. I'm like, I remember what that guy said. So, the burden of a teacher, right? We sometimes don't see the development and the success of our students till later. So
that is very powerful. So when you're going in, how are you helping? What are you doing? You're speaking? You said you're a behavioral coach. So tell me a little bit about what you're doing, how you're helping to implement this kind of change and their mindset and the way they view their decisions.
Yeah. So very simply, I realized that if there is some stranger that's going to come into a school and start telling them to make better decisions, unless I frame this very carefully, most of them are going to tune out. So what I like to do is make sure.
Great observation. Very astute.
Right? Like, oh, here's another guy telling me to make good decisions. Yikes. So I don't necessarily start by saying we're going to make better decisions. Like that's rough. I actually start by playing music. So we have a really good time. I want them to feel something. I want them to recognize that this is not going to be just like a doom and gloom assembly. So, trumpets rocking, we're blasting high hopes, Panic at the Disco. It's a fun time. When we go into it, I also recognize that if they're going to walk away with one thing, it's got to be tangible, and it's got to be simple, and it's got to be sequential, or lack of somewhat sequential. So what I do is I talk about that every decision that we make has three truths to it. So there's three truths behind every big or small decision, and it pretty much goes like this, right? Truth number one: our decisions stem from our story, which we just talked about. We unpack that very, very clearly. Truth number two: our decisions have consequences. And again, I poke fun at this. Like, oh, this guy's up here talking about consequences. Come on. Like, I hear this stuff from everybody. And I talk to them like, well, then why do we know people that are still making poor decisions with having poor consequences? This opens up the conversations about emotions, the emotions that we experience and our relationship to these emotions. I ask the students, raise your hand if you're a stressed person. Again, 90, 80%, 90% of the hands go up. Are you an anxious person? All the hands go up. And I just say, I'm like, oh my, most of you all have just identified yourself as someone who is as a stressed person, as an anxious person. You have now put your identity, the same thing I did with my professional career, absolutely a dangerous way of thinking. So I say, you are not a stressed person. You are somebody who is experiencing stress. You are somebody who is experiencing anxiety. Maybe you're experiencing it a little bit more than often. But if you want to make a change in your behavior and your subconscious thinking and your relationship to the emotions, you have to make sure that you are, in a way, separating yourself from an emotion you're just experiencing. Because then that leads us to be able to experience positive emotions, much more so than the negative ones. That's what life is this balance of beautiful and negative emotions and leaning into all of them. And I think I did actually a decent job when I was in high school because I had such a great high school experience. I remember the hard times, but I had such an unbelievable 4 years. Loved every minute of it for the most part. And then finally, the third truth is that our decisions are mine to make. I say mine. Our decisions are ours to make. And this is when we talk about accountability versus victimhood. It is so easy. It's so easy. I'm holding up my phone because it's so easy for our teens to get sucked into an algorithm that says, this is bad, the world is imploding, this is terrible. And if they're going to look for it, unfortunately, they're kind of fed to it, right? Because that's what they're engaging with. Naturally, it's human nature. Then they're going to keep getting more of it. But if we look for the positive, and if we try to reshape our algorithm just by having that awareness alone, but we're in control of our algorithm pretty much, that opens up a whole nother door of positivity. We can be accountable for the things that we want to do, not so much for the things that we have to do. And one of the ways we do that tactically is using gratitude. I know it's an overstated word, but it's the most powerful thing. If you are grateful for all the amazing things you have in your life, it's so easy to be like, yeah, I had these dreams. I'm going to go chase them. Yeah, I got in this car accident. I did that. I need to know what I did wrong here. It's a beautiful tactic and a beautiful way I'd like to try to have students develop a routine around. Gratitude every day.
I love that you landed on gratitude. For those of you who are watching this whenever this airs, it's much past Thanksgiving when we do this, but for the entire month of November, our focus at Generation Youth on our social media is gratitude and how powerful it is to help young people with their mindset, with developing their self-image, developing positive relationships, and finding their purpose and goals. So the fact that you did that, just said that, it just got me excited. It's like, oh, we're on the right track on doing that. That's powerful. How can our audience connect with you? Where can they find out what you're doing? Where can they connect with Kevin? Because I hope they're excited about this, because the cycle, we need to know more about this. So
Well, I'd be happy to connect with anybody looking to. The main place to find everything that I have going on and kind of dig deeper is kevinmecchella.com, 2 C's, 2 L's. And I'm all over social media. You can just find me, just search the name, Kevin Mecchella. If you are specifically working for a school or a youth organization who wants to possibly work with me more directly, there's a page on the website which is like, book Kevin. You could always just fill out a form. We'll have a conversation and kind of go from there. But yeah, I'm all over.
And do you do one-on-one or group coaching for youth? You mentioned you
I
were
do. Yeah,
behavioral
I do
coach.
some. I do some. I'm looking to definitely do a little more of it. But yeah, my main focus is working with districts in a more large capacity, but I do some. Yep.
Very good. Well, all of those links and how to connect with Kevin, you're going to find in the show notes. So if you're watching on YouTube, you know the drill. You just kind of look down and hit the show more, and you'll see all those things. If you're listening, just go to your favorite podcast app, find your show notes, and you'll find all those those links. Kevin, thank you. Thank you for this. And I'm excited about the opportunities we have to collaborate together in the future over the next several months. So this is exciting. This has given me a lot to work to. My audience sometimes thinks that I'm just making stuff up when I say that I learn more than probably they do, but this one really has focused me on a lot of different things, not only in my own personal situations with family members, but to the coaching program where we certify people to be coaches, thinking about how do we integrate some of this into our existing platform. So thank you for your insight. It's been really insightful for me today.
Well, James, thank you for all your work too. I see what you're doing. We need more people like you. And thank you once again for having me on. I appreciate it.
And audience, we want to thank you guys for sticking with us. If you've been with us for almost 35 minutes, you obviously have liked what you've been listening to or watching, or you left it on by mistake. Either way, we're grateful that you're here. And so we want to ask you to do 3 things. And you know what they are if you follow us. Please like this podcast, comment on it on your various platforms. But the most important thing that Kevin and I would like for you to do is to find someone who doesn't know about this and share this episode. Share this because someone needs to hear this message. Someone needs to hear this to help them equip the young people that they work with, whether they're children or if they're teachers, with the tools they need in order that they can thrive and they can be their best self. And so we really, that's our honest desire, is for you to share this. So thank you again, Kevin. Thank you again, audience. And we'll see you again very soon on another episode of the Generation Youth Podcast.